All right. Hello, everybody who's here. Our presentation today, I'm Joe Lloyd. I'm going to be the moderator for this session. For this presentation today, we have Rebecca McNulty and Charlotte Jones Roberts, who are going to be talking to us about student voices on AI. So just a reminder that this session will be recorded. And Charlotte and Rebecca, I will turn it over to you.
Incredible. Thank you so much, Joe. As Joe mentioned, I am Charlotte Jones Roberts, and I'm here with my esteemed colleague, Dr. Rebecca McNulty. We are from the University of Central Florida, here in sunny Orlando, Florida. We are both instructional designers with the Center for Distributed Learning, and Rebecca is formerly of the Top Kit team, and I am currently of the Top Kit team. And today, as mentioned, we're going to be talking about student voices on AI. And I feel like we just followed the student panel, which of course, AI being the hot topic that it is, just to kind of perhaps inform some of the questions that will be asked and some of the questions that we will answer today. But we wanted to get started a little bit with our research, the research that we're hoping to conduct, and hopefully during this session, we'll get all sorts of insights and good discussion going. So is there anything you wanted to add, Rebecca?
That was exactly it. You can get us started.
All right. So we wanted to start with a really, really, really big number. So the number is 1 billion plus. And I just wanted to get elicit some chatter in the chat. And I wanted to ask you what you think this number could represent in terms of AI. Users of AI? Close. It's more than that. There's fewer users. Not users. Good guess though. And please no more fish. Number of requests per month, number of tokens in a day, prompts generated. So you guys are correct with your talking about tokens or prompts. How frequently do you think? A
Oh,
number of
migraines. No,
migraines.
thank you.
Amy, I'm starting to feel like that. So as of the most frequent data, and great guesses, you guys, you're hitting the nail on the head here. This is prompts per day in ChatGPT alone. So this is not all of generative AI. This is specifically from ChatGPT's data, but it's over 1 billion prompts per day that are being generated. So it just kind of gives you some context for why is everybody talking about it? Here's why. Because in OpenAI alone, the provider of this data from 2025, that's how many prompts we're getting per day in generative AI. So getting started after that, in this presentation, what we're going to talk about is much more microcosmic, given that we are an online faculty development workshop. We're going to talk about an overview of generative AI as of 2025, which it's changing rapidly. So we're talking about the first quarter of 2025 when our research exists. Our research on student values and how that contributes to our findings. The implications for faculty development, of course, as mentioned. And most importantly, your thoughts and how we can all connect and contribute and start a conversation surrounding all of these ideas. So, without any further ado, I would like you guys to join us via Slido. You can use your phone if you're like me and you have it by your side. I'm assuming most of you do. Or if you prefer your browser, you can go to slido.com and enter in the hashtag with 1149094. And that will allow you to select the emotions that best describe how you feel about generative AI tools. This should be really responsive. We should see your reactions in real time. I love using Slido if you haven't used it, specifically because it allows us to see your responses in real time and actually show them and how they start to get responses in real time. There we go. I love it. Oh, going down. So far, awesome. We have Curious in the lead here, Inspired coming in second. I love it. I feel like Curious is a nice little
It's a
mid-level
catch-all.
of emotions. It really is. Optimistic. Oh, good. Okay, getting a great read on this group right now regarding feelings. Inspired, even. Okay, fantastic. We're having 11% on anxious, concerned, confused. I'm going to scroll down just a little bit here because my browser isn't quite catching everybody's no emotion. Fearful 0. Okay. Well, I'm glad to hear that. Curious is still in the lead. We have 11 participants, and how many people are in our chat right now?
19.
19. Okay, so if you still want, feel free to join us and respond to this Slido poll. There's still about, we'll give it about 30 more seconds. And if you're having trouble using the Slido poll for some reason, you can also share your favorite adjective in the chat. I won't mind. Like I said, I love using Slido because it's able to create a artifact that we can keep using, that we can return to. But if you can't use it, we want to create access as well. Well, Rebecca, we've got a really curious and optimistic group.
This is a good audience. I'm pleased.
Absolutely amazing, you guys. I'm going to scroll down one more time to see if we got fearful, and we have 0 fearful. Wow. Okay. So I know that you guys, of course, are here at a smoke and mirrors, Matt. I don't disagree. We're here at an online teaching conference, so I'm very glad to hear that you are not fearful and that we are actually more curious and optimistic and ready to experiment. So, wanted to start here. Rebecca, do you want this slide?
Yeah, so quick introduction to AI, 2025 version in a nutshell. AI tools assist with content development, and in a faculty development perspective, it can assist with developing customized content specific to student needs and personalized learning, however you want to define that. Now, it would be underneath that proverbial smoke and mirrors that you'd have to be living to not have had this conversation 7 times in the last 3 days. So we're just wanting to continue thinking about how we're integrating the student voice into this. And it feels a little silly to be talking about it, honestly, after this last panel, because that was a lot more insightful and a lot more on the ground than we're able to be. But just thinking through places of integrity, ensuring that AI use supports learning, not replaces it from both the student side and from a faculty side, making sure that access is at the forefront, advocating for fair and consistent availability of any AI tools for students when integrating that into assignments in any way. And then just maintaining that human connection, which is going to be the key theme that you're going to see throughout this presentation, making sure that we're balancing any kind of AI assistance, however that refines, with meaningful human interaction.
So it'd be helpful if I unmuted. I wanted to talk really briefly about the background of our research, that is our being my and Rebecca's research. So we started really looking at Gen Z. So that's where all of this began. And then we were looking at Gen Z learners and what their preferences were. Then AI, of course, naturally kind of got balled up into it because we were finding that these interactive, personalized experiences were also falling in with the technology that was currently being used, which is generative AI a lot of the time. Um, of course, as you guys know, AI in education, Rebecca's specialty, she started as an adaptive learning instructional designer. And this kind of adaptive learning and automation is going to continue to increase as we're using AI generated content, of course. However, with that being said, there's all sorts of concerns. Like Rebecca said, we've had so many conversations over the past 3 days regarding bias, regarding academic integrity, and of course, ethics surrounding AI, which we've also looked at with students. And specifically at our university, the University of Central Florida, currently, although we do have siloed data, we don't have localized data on student expectations regarding AI enhanced instructional materials, and that is where our study begins, specifically look at students. So I wanted to share also a little bit on student voices on AI, and this is not from our research, but rather from OpenAI, which is, of course, our purveyors of ChatGPT as of 2025. So what students are saying about their use is that about a quarter of students are using ChatGPT messages for starting papers, summarizing text, brainstorming, and exploring other things. So a quarter of them are using that for education. And 75% of these students want AI training. However, 25% of colleges are currently offering it. So they would love to know how to use it, but it's not currently being offered. Many students are self-teaching or learning from peers, and this is the large majority, is that they're not taking their instruction, of course, from a university or a faculty member. They're just teaching it to themselves. And finally, last but not least, 70% of these employers prefer candidates with AI skills, according to OpenAI. Oh, that wasn't the last one. Actually, our last bullet, I lied, is that there are, of course, equity concerns, which are gaps in institutional support, and state-by-state adoptions are creating huge disparities, as we just noticed with our students who were at different universities in different states, in access and opportunity regarding AI use. So we wanted to create another conversation inside of Slido. And again, you can use slido.com, or the prompt is slightly separate here. And that is, in your opinion, just thinking about it from the beginning, what challenges are you seeing this introduce specifically for faculty development, knowing that most of us are IDs who are teaching faculty how to teach, and then our peers as well who are faculty here in this session with us? What challenges is this creating? Silos.
I might have added that one. Sorry.
It is everywhere. It is popping up everywhere. And how are we keeping tabs on it? I know it said that, of course, there's disparities among different universities and how they are addressing AI. But there you go. And I feel like that second comment ties in with it really nicely. Inconsistency within departments or across disciplines. How are these being equitably released? Oh my gosh, that's so good. Rebecca, would you mind taking this over for just a second? Give me a moment.
Absolutely. So adding more work to anxiety, absolutely. Tool overload, rapidly evolving tech, and a lack of AI literacy, all of the above. Hi, friend. Frodo needs to address the adding more work to anxiety, please.
I'm really sorry. My favorite thing about the pandemic, you guys, was getting to meet everybody's dogs. So anyway, Frodo is going to co-present with me right now because currently I'm the only one in the house, and we are barking at things. So anyway,
Implementation issues is the last. A resistance to change, absolutely. Charlie, you can grab it from me.
absolutely. Oh my goodness, I am hearing I mean, there's so many different points that you guys are saying so succinctly here. Resistance to change, shifting pedagogy, and different policies, not just across universities, not just across disciplines, but also across courses. My goodness, guys, you are.
And that last one, ensuring introduction of evidence-based best practices when we don't have evidence-based best practices that we're building as we go, which is fabulous.
It's true. And how can we keep up is the other thing that I would add to that input there.
And then Amy Darty in the chat, it reminds us of overload mentally between switching from face-to-face to suddenly online learning, changing of the guard, just these immediate moments of touch points of change that we get to react to as we're building the plane while we're flying it.
Incredible. Yes. So we have one more person who is typing, and I'll go ahead and let them finish. If you want to hit enter.
Inconsistency and conflicting messages and writing assessments without alternatives.
That is, and I'm going to address that one. We're going to address a lot of these actually in our presentation, but writing assessments with no alternative is a huge thing that I hope we continue to discuss in this presentation as well. So next, we're going to look at our survey specifically and what we are looking at. This is a survey that was adapted by Del Strito et al. From Oregon State University, as well as the good old Technology Acceptance Framework, the TAM framework that many of you should be familiar with if you're in ID and technology. Basically, what we're exploring is student views on generative AI in course design and in learning. So specifically, how we are imbuing this into courses and how students view that being imbued into courses. So we're looking at instructor use, how they're using AI, what are students' concerns and hopes, the policies and how clear they are, either that's in the classroom or in the university or at a state level. We're also measuring those feelings. At the very beginning of our presentation, we talked about what are you feeling right now. Now, we're a very optimistic group, but we're looking specifically at what students are feeling and those expectations also surrounding AI. As mentioned, this is based on the technology acceptance model as well, which is talking about how useful they find AI to be, as well as the ease of use and how they intend to use it, as well as, of course, demographic questions will be included for context as we continue. And I'll send it over to Rebecca next.
All right, so we're going to start with thinking about how can student perceptions of AI inform faculty development. And a lot of this is coming out of conversations that we're having with faculty who are using these tools for themselves. So if someone comes to me and says, I'd like to integrate AI generated content into my teaching and learning, what kind of things can we recommend? What kind of best practices can we build? And pull the evidence behind them to make sure that we're making informed decisions. And we want to start with the student voice in looking at what that looks like. So we can go ahead and get started with that first question. So we want to know what students think about generative AI tools as they can be used by instructors to enhance course design and delivery. Now, this is sort of a broad question because we're trying to capture both the content on a static page. And again, we work in online learning, so these are mostly asynchronous web-based courses, some synchronous elements, but we're thinking about what this looks like in learning management system and as interactive opportunities for students. So some of the options that we're looking for are, would you feel comfortable if your instructor is brainstorming new teaching methods, creating more interactive assignments, personalizing course materials to individual needs that students bring up, and then generating real-time feedback on assignments. So thinking through everything from that first design phase, just brainstorming the new things, to creating assignments and adding elements of interactivity that perhaps the AI can facilitate in ways that we couldn't before, to personalizing materials, and then thinking through how it looks from a real-time basis. So our current data and rationale, what we're looking at the national trends, is that students are already using AI as a tutor and as a learning tool. And that survey responses, as they've been contributing to some of these places that we're researching, are seeing that there's a high interest in generating custom study materials. So this is student use, taking instructional materials and generating materials based on the things that the student is currently struggling with. Tailored examples. So I don't quite understand this application. Could you explain it to me using this other metaphor? And then personalizing step-by-step instructions. Survey responses are also showing an interest in streamlining administrative tasks, which is really interesting to me. Students saying that they would love to see AI tools taking away some of the administrative burdens from their instructors so that the faculty members have more time to spend on that one-on-one instruction. So if, as a teacher, I don't need to answer 8 million emails, what can I do with that new time that supports student learning? And this is supporting these prior findings by the Delastratos, excuse me, study that we've been using as a model, emphasizing personalized enhancements to preserve interaction between students and instructor, which is that human element. Next question is, what ways do you think instructors could use Gen AI tools to support your learning? So as opposed to designing the learning, supporting the actual facilitation of the course. Some of the examples there are providing clearer explanations of difficult topics, offering additional practice exercises, summarizing key points, and again, real-time study or assignment help. So a range again from explanations of topics that might happen at 3 in the morning when someone is studying after having worked all day, to real-time study and assignment help where some of that feedback could be integrated into that course design and assessment. So our current data and rationale here is that students do believe that AI can supplement instruction, but that supplement seems to be the key phrase here, making sure that it's in addition to the human element and is implemented in such a way that it supports that human element. Survey responses show a high interest in custom explanations, tailored practice opportunities again, and then also real-time support. So having something and someone, I use someone, available at all times to have that first triage level of support. So it's easier to come to the professor and say, I'm good with these 5 topics, but I'm really struggling with this integration. Let's talk about it. And then what concerns, if any, do you have about instructors using Gen AI tools in their course design and in their teaching? So I know accuracy of information generated by AI content is something we really want to think about in terms of student perception as well as faculty oversight. Potential biases in AI generated content, and then an over-reliance of AI reducing instructor interaction. And the current data and rationale here is that students are hesitantly comfortable with AI as a supplemental tool, but believe that these tools are disrupting education in many ways. Survey responses show concern about a devaluing of learning and education, and this is some of those access questions if someone's going to be penalized for not using these tools. Trustworthiness of AI output, both from the assessment side of things as well as any kind of generated content, and then access and integrity, making sure that everything is fair and on the table and everyone has access to the same things. And again, this supports prior findings, emphasizing a desire to preserve that meaningful human interaction and make sure that these tools aren't taking away from it. With that, I will throw it back over to Charlotte.
Excellent. I'm catching, even though my hand-eye coordination is nothing to write home about.
That's what AI can help us with.
I wish. Oh my gosh, if only. So talking next about the next part of our survey, which is going to look at specifically AI literacy for students, which is what do they want to know, you guys? What are students asking and how are they using AI and how are they feeling about it is the next part of our survey. Um, so specifically, we asked what kinds of guidance would you like instructors to provide when they're using generative AI tools in courses? How to use it for course specific tasks. Think that includes rubrics, ethical considerations when using generative AI tools. And then, of course, how to critically evaluate outputs from generative AI tools. I loved the example from one of our panelists this morning talking about he used it to complete a computer science project, and then he said he got a 50 on it. So how are we critically evaluating these outputs that are coming from Gen AI and assessing whether or not there's something that is good enough to put out there? And I know that Matt also put in the comments that it's changing rapidly, so this answer would probably change, from month to month as we disseminate the survey. However, are we using those critical thinking skills, those soft skills that are outside of AI use to actually critically evaluate those outputs? So the current data says that, of course, students do want clear guidance on coursework, and I'm going to say that with a caveat that there's a little bit of contradiction in the current research regarding this, and that current responses show high interest in how you're applying it in the courses, ethical considerations, and then how to critically evaluate these AI outputs. And critical evaluation, in my view, would be very similar to a peer review. The students are given a rubric and they're asked to critically evaluate in the same way a peer would with another student's output in a similar way. And this is aligned with the technology acceptance model because that's guiding and enhancing perceived usefulness and ease of use. But I wanted to go back really quickly to that clear guidance on AI tools and coursework because there's a little bit of contradiction that happens there among the OpenAI survey that we looked at from 2025 and the OSU survey that we looked at from 2024. Because the students say that they want clarity and responsible AI use, but as you'll see in a little bit, they also don't want to hear it from the teachers. So there's a little bit of a discrepancy here that I would love for us to dig into a little bit and discuss as we keep going. The other question that we're looking at is talking specifically about rate your level of agreement on I know how to use Gen AI tools and they will improve my grade in a course. Knowing AI tools will help me get a job. Knowing how to use AI tools will help me get work. And knowing how to use generative AI tools will help me advance my career. So the rationale behind this is that in the OSU survey, 63% said it could help them at work, and 53% said it could help them get a job. However, only 43% agree that AI could help improve their grades, highlighting a gap between an academic and professional value. That supports the findings, of course, from Del Cerrito 2024. And what I wanted to open up next was given this current data that we're all looking at and what you guys have heard from your own personal experiences, um, we already asked this question, didn't we? What challenges did you foresee with faculty development? This is a question that we already asked, so let me go back here just a second.
Interesting.
Yeah, I don't know why that showed up twice. We already asked that one. I wanted to ask really quickly then, and if you could just respond in the chat, that would be fantastic because it looks like the Slido finally didn't do what I wanted to do. I'm really a big fan of Slido technical right now. I wanted to go into the practical takeaways, and then we can look at the chat and perhaps the discussion as well. talking about the practical takeaways of this study as we continue to collect data and where we can go here with faculty development. So using the current research that we've encountered, we found that students want demystification, not just access. And like I said, the student panel said this as well, that students want to know how and when they should use the AI tools and the ethics surrounding them, not just have something throwing spaghetti at the wall. Additionally, they want to use AI to enhance and not replace teaching. That gets into the human element again and instructor presence that cannot possibly be replaced. So I hope that as we continue to discuss this, we talk about what are things that we can't replace, that AI cannot possibly be a substitute for. And
You
finally,
know what,
answer. Mhm.
Charlotte, I just went back through some of our questions, and this last one was a little bit different. So the first one we asked is what challenges that we have seen already, and the rest are what challenges we'd foresee. So it might be worth opening that back up with the thoughts based on these practical takeaways. So finish this slide and then let's jump back in.
Absolutely, that sounds great. And then talking about that academic career and skills gap. Now, as generative AI is moving so quickly, um, many students are not seeing the benefits of AI as a learning tool, how they're using that critical thinking element to actually assess the output. They're just using it as a tool to write papers. And really, a practical takeaway from this research is that faculty can help by linking AI use to real world applications and classroom success that is not just writing papers, things that are really used to help them learn as a tool, as a tutor, and not just fixing something. So just as Rebecca said, let's go back and I'm going to go to that other Slido.
So we started with thinking through what challenges is AI introduced for faculty development? So we've seen the differences in disciplines, we've seen the shifting pedagogy. I'm wondering if we could mine our audience for the challenges that we foresee, maybe moving beyond those first steps of AI literacy. Exactly. Faculty need to be connected to practitioners. How can we draw those lines when everyone is moving as we are? And Amy in the chat, this mirrors the early debates and implementations of computer tech use courses in the 90s and the internet and Wikipedia. I prefer Wikipedia as the Gen AI metaphor over calculators because it's more than a tool. It's more of a shifting knowledge source. And how do you work through that kind of knowledge acquisition without the guardrails? Because the calculator doesn't generally give me the wrong answer to who won the Super Bowl. Institution mandates versus faculty pace, sure. And the back and forth. So when the institution is doing something that faculty aren't comfortable with, or a faculty moving so much further ahead than the institutional policies that we see sometimes. Developing ways to help faculty use AI for real world experiences for students. This is where I am super excited. How can we use these tools to do things that we haven't been able to do before? But first we have to define what those things are. Balancing assistance and academic integrity, absolutely. And time. Time to use the tools, time to learn the tools, time to develop the best practices for the tools when none of the work has actually really gone away.
And that's so funny because that's such a, it's a one word response. So the way I interpreted it, Rebecca, was totally different.
Oh, tell me.
I was just like, no, I was just like, what the future holds, because
Oh,
it is
sure.
so different, from month to month. And I hope we dig into that again a little bit more when we go into the Padlet, because that also talks
Yes.
about how we can philosophically approach AI use for students and faculty development.
Assessing process instead of product. And that goes back to some of the writing assignments, thinking through what those are really assessing, what kind of real skills can be replicated, and where the human fits into that loop. Differences in AI use between different disciplines. That's so many D words in there. Different faculty development. Different faculty have different opinions, how they could and should be used. And that goes back to the pace between institutional policies and faculty pacing, assessing product, linking your learning outcomes, and using AI tools to actually link them. Sorry. I get to do a special dance when the lights go off in the office.
Yes, and finally conducting research when instructors are using AI to inform faculty specifically on pedagogy. And that is exactly Nicole yesterday talked about the Trail, TRAIIL, which is a repository for using AI in the classroom, and exactly how to conduct that research to make sure that it's being used effectively in the classroom, both online and in person. Okay, fantastic. Do you think we're good to go and move on
I
to the
think we're good to
discussion,
go.
Rebecca?
Let's do it.
Fantastic. Thank you guys so much for your incredible insights. I'm really excited to
This is
hear
such a good audience.
where we go from here. So ultimately, yeah, we're at about 2:35, which is just perfect timing for where we needed to be. And basically that's that generative AI is here to stay. You know, the toothpaste is out of the tube, as everybody keeps saying. It's not going anywhere. We can't put it back and we can't keep mandating that things need to stop here. The ball stops here. We can't completely force students to stop using it. What are practical ways we can help our faculty equip students with the skills needed to be successful? And I invite you guys to, of course, share on the Padlet, which I'm going to double check if I can say it right there. Fantastic, which Rebecca has also shared inside of the chat. Awesome. And that kind of is broken down into these four questions, which is how do we demystify AI? I loved how this group was not fearful in those initial emotions. We are curious. We are hopeful, optimistic even. Where is the human connection and where can that live and how can we continue to foster that inside of our faculty development and by proxy, sending that to our students? What do the faculty need to know in order to do that? And then ultimately, what do students need to know? As we're in the process of conducting this research, this is really the goals of what we need to know to inform FD. And I think, yes, this should start going automatically and we see what's going on. And as we begin to see these themes emerge inside of the Padlet, in a little bit, I'd like to get your feedback first because I know that I'm a writer and then a talker. But if you work the other way, I'd welcome you guys to formulate your thoughts and then invite you to unmute and have a little bit of a discussion about this.
For demystifying Gen AI, I love modeling the use and transparency, just telling students when you're using it and how you're using it and why you're using it and when you're not using it and when it went badly and when it didn't generate anything that you'd expect and when the human element comes through and I saw this, but I modified X, Y, and Z, just showing how we want them to move forward in the future. Communicating the basic foundations for how AI works. Yep. I really want a rubber stamp that just says probability model at this point that I can just walk around and place in random places. And I really loved the first guess, Charlotte, which was not when we were thinking through what that billion number might look like when someone said tokens instead of prompts, because that's really the crux of it, thinking through what these tiny little pieces of words mean and how they're building into all of this.
Well, yeah, and no, and I want to dig into that what graceful shrimp there a little bit said. And of course, this is anonymous right now, you guys, but if you do want to share in chat, please feel free to do that as well. Exactly. The basics foundations of how AI works. I have talked to several students, and I am a mother of three as well, and what my different children of different ages understand of how AI works is scary to them. But when you break it down to what Rebecca said about the probability model, and then it's just a huge aggregate, really, of the human voice, it becomes a lot less scary. It becomes a lot more, like Matt said, smoke and mirrors at the beginning. And you start to recognize these patterns and things that we can approach a lot more methodically rather than kind of constantly feeling like we're overwhelmed and drinking from a fire hydrant because it's changingly constantly, but at the end of the day, it's the same as it ever was, and we can approach these with practical approaches.
think I want to save the human connection to the end. So looking through what do faculty need to know, what AI tools work best for their field, not just large language models, absolutely, and what works best for how they are delivering content in their field, because that's going to look different between the different disciplines. Grading with AI is a mirage. I love that. And there's been a movement on some of the learning circles to think about the things that AI gets wrong has been called hallucinations. There's been a movement to move that into mirage as a term because hallucination implies that it's making something up, whereas a mirage is it's giving you a photo in front of you of something that doesn't exist because it's based on those different patterns.
I had not heard that. I only ever heard
Really?
hallucination. Yeah.
Oh, I'll find the source is pretty. It's really well articulated. Oh, please.
Yeah, I really do love that. I'm sort of taking a moment to chew on the idea of it being a mirage as a opposed to a hallucination because exactly, it's not something that's created. It's something that is a mirage is a much better term. And I love also Graceful Shrimp again said, don't use it for the sake of using it. What problem does it solve, or how does it positively impact student learning?
So Megan in the chat says it absolutely hallucinates, and sure, it absolutely gives information that is not true, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on how that verb really resonates for you, if you'd like to share.
Yeah, Megan, I actually like both as a
Mhm.
hallucination or a mirage. Um, so I literally only just heard that today, though.
Oh, cool. Thank you, Matt.
And also same, Megan.
And looking through cross-disciplinary uses for faculty, absolutely, and seeing how these kind of tools can facilitate some of the cross-disciplinary collaboration in new ways. Don't use it for the sake of using it. Yes. What problems does it solve? How does it positively impact student learning? Looking into the side of what students need to know, shared AI use policy, absolutely. Just some form of transparency. What do you expect? Students want to give it what you expect. And then Megan in the chat, we tried using it for some work. It made up information, even with input prompts left and right after a point. I pointed it out, apologized, asked for redirection. Yeah. And AI wants to please us. It wants to give us the answer that it thinks we want. So if it needs to make something up to give it what it thinks we want, then it's gonna do. And then I guess it's time for human connection. This is a beautiful answer from Graceful Shrimp. Questioning, reflecting, problem solving, evaluating or critiquing among faculty and students when using AI and looking at the output. What's so interesting to me is that AI feels like it's doing those high level, high order blooms techniques. It feels like it's creating, but it's not. Based on the probability model, it's regurgitating what other people have created and presenting it as if it were fact with a really confident tone. So it feels like it's saying the correct thing when it might be making things up to please us. So how do we show students based on assessment, based on problem-based learning, authentic group discussions, that we can show students where that human voice needs to layer onto the AI-generated output?
Yeah, and for this one especially, I know that Matt just mentioned that Padlets got stuck in review. I'm wondering if I'm not sure what I've never had that happen before.
Hmm.
If you guys could unmute, I think that this one is the perfect one to unmute and talk about, just because this is the human connection. This is the human element. So if you want to go ahead and unmute and share, Matt, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, it's just there's two resources that I shared. The one is the student guide to AI in the last column. That was
And I'm
done
actually
by
seeing it in mine. So Charlotte, I'm going to steal the share.
anyway, that one I thought was a good resource for students who really just on their own they stumbled on this and they're trying to navigate on their own without too much guidance from the institution. I thought that resource, like there's 7 principles in there that are pretty clear that explain, the kind of questions you should ask yourself when you're a student. And then the other one that I use a lot to help faculty members and people understand LLMs is the one from the Financial Times, the one about the transformer process that explains, how these LLMs are actually creating the sentences with like the probabilities and all that stuff. And I think that demystifies it kind of breaks the myth of like the consciousness. You really want to make sure that people understand that they're talking to machines and that they're projecting the sense in whatever conversation they're having. It's funny because last night I actually went to a face-to-face session on AI for small businesses, as if I wasn't, I didn't have enough conferences in one day. And I was talking to a colleague and an attendee that was there, and the guy was like, "Yeah, I asked ChatGPT to write a little blurb about the project that I worked on for the last year or whatever." And when he described me, I felt like he knew me better than myself. And I was like, well, you projected that sense on that thing. He was just like flabbergasted that the tool was understanding him so much and, putting all the right qualifiers on what he does and the values that he holds and that kind of stuff. And I'm like, well, ChatGPT probably gave you a bunch of BS at some point, and you just said, "Oh, stupid ChatGPT, go home, you're drunk." And then once in a while, it comes up with some kind of knowledge nugget, and now all of a sudden, oh man, this thing really understands me. But it's one of those things where you're the one who actually projects the sense to the use of these tools, or whatever the outputs are.
And that reminds me so nicely, Matt, of somebody yesterday in the chat. I think it was during Kevin's panel on the future of ID. And somebody in the chat said that they used it kind of as like a counselor and how they used it to assuage their anxiety and like used it to like, put ideas back and forth. But isn't that interesting that, it's literally parroting back to you exactly what you're putting in there. So I think that's the smoke and mirrors thing and the mirage thing that you've given us to think about is going to stick with me because reminding students of that as well, that reminding them that it's forming this new image, whether it's a hallucination or a mirage or a mirror, whatever illusion you're using, it's forming this based on the input that you're giving it, surrounded with the input that it already has. So I think really contextualizing the tool is going to be incredibly important for teaching students in the future. So that's wonderful. And I'm very glad you went to it in person because I love the conversations that we have in person.
Mm-hmm.
This is
There-
Joe.
Hey, Joe.
I'm the graceful shrimp.
You're the graceful shrimp.
Yeah, so I really, I'm really interested in the human connection part because as much as I love playing around with AI, it's not human. It can't do certain things. And I just like humans, how they question things and how you can reflect on things and, creative ways of solving problems. And, I do evaluation and there's so much when I'm evaluating a program that I observe and I see, and you have to put all those things together to really come up with accurate results. So I think AI has so much promise. I have been trying it out in my own classes, sometimes successfully, sometimes not. And I teach graduate students, so they're a little different in the way they look at AI, I think. But there's a lot to what was being said about even illusions. I think it's really, we have to be careful that we might have that illusion of knowing, I think is what it's called, where, I can go in and ask ChatGPT some very specific questions when I'm brainstorming, or I just want to learn something about, I do a lot of gardening. I mean, I ask it all kinds of questions. And I'm getting information, but how knowledgeable am I? How much of it am I really learning and understanding with detail? And I think that's what students don't want to miss, is that deep understanding and gaining that expertise in that field that you're studying.
Yeah, and I wanted to, and I put it in the chat as well, Joe. I was going to let you keep talking, but I think that was a huge takeaway that I noticed yesterday from Patsy's study that was on student voices in AI as well. Um, that the theme seemed to be that students think they know, that they didn't want to be told how to use AI because simultaneously they already were confident in their ability to use AI. So I think that there may be a bit of a disconnect there. Yeah, exactly. Confirmation bias, Dunning-Kruger. Um, exactly. That you think you know, but you may need a little bit of redirection. I think that there's definitely an opportunity there to explore that both with faculty and with students.
Yeah,
Wanna-
maybe to bounce on that, um, I think that it's hard to admit when you're wrong. Like every human being like doesn't like to be wrong. And learning and getting better involves that you're going to have to decrystallize certain things that you thought were right and live with that. So it's like one of those things where we have to get students to that point where, okay, there are things it doesn't mean that they're right. So it's like, how can you actually come up with good strategies to make sure that students recognize these biases, that they recognize things that they don't know, and that they're willing to get rid of these old paradigms to actually learn something new. And I think that with AI, when it's unsupervised, then it can just get you further down the rabbit hole instead of correcting you, especially because AIs are usually trying to be friendly and be your friend and just, end up just always agreeing with you if you push them a little. So, that role of being somebody who's going to be a critic of your thought or your process is something that you need to assign to the AI. And you have to, even if the prompt, you can say, for instance, I want you to be reviewer number two. I want you to be that person who's going to be challenging me in a good way and push me further in my thinking.
So true. And if I can insert myself again, I know it's y'all's turn to talk. Um, that's the goal of the instructor. And I think that that is also a thing that's going to happen as this data begins to unfold is how do we stop being panicked about it? I mean, and I know that we're a great group to talk to. We're all in similar boats regarding our feelings, but how are we going to share that with faculty that you guys are still the experts, maybe not on AI, but on those guidance principles on how are we teaching students to critically think and assess and understand that this is nothing new under the sun.
And a fun conversation in the chat, just thinking about the digital literacy skills necessary to evaluate information at this moment. So taking the skills necessary to critically evaluate what Google sends back at you with a layer of AI on top of it.
Yeah, and I wanted to just give another little shout out to Joe Smith, who got me really interested on what are we assessing outside of AI. I think it was mentioned, oh, I think it was Michael who mentioned it. Don't quote me on that though, from the panel who said, if writing assignments are now becoming arbitrary because everybody can create a B-level paper with AI. What are we assessing inside of these rubrics that's not writing? That's not something that AI can produce. And Joe, I might ask you to interject on what you found there on your rubric. I know you said creativity, collaboration, and these types of soft skills that are not content specifically, but these other skills. Joe, do you mind interjecting there? I'm drawing a blank on what
It's
the
pretty
other skills
close
were.
it's pretty close to what I put under that. What's the human connection? Reflecting. So making sure that you're asking students to reflect on what the output was. Making sure that they're critiquing it and evaluating it for accuracy, but also ethically, or do they see any bias in it? All those things that they need to know how to do, and that's what we're teaching them, is to do these high order types of thinking that AI can look at data, but its output isn't always seeing it all. That's what I'm saying. The human can, how we see those things in each other. So maybe even working with students and assessing the way that maybe they worked on a team with using AI would be something, the collaboration that they're doing with others in the course while using that tool. That could be something that they're doing. But yeah, you have to evaluate different aspects, because what they're going to need to know what to do in the future, what are those skills that they're going to have, and I think that's what our discussion was. Beyond prompt engineering, although I do see a place for that, how looking at how and what they're asking AI to do, and how does that come out the other end of AI, because you know when you ask it to do things like the chocolate fish thing or whatever, sometimes it comes out really wonky. So
That
you
was
have to
the
know.
perfect redirection. No notes. And the
Yeah.
reflective opportunities are going to be what doesn't change regardless of the tool, right? So AI can completely change its capabilities every 32 minutes, but if we're asking students to reflect on it and explain how they're using it and why and how it's a collaborative tool, we're going to just be building towards a better set of skills for everyone. Charlotte, I think that puts us right at time.
It certainly does. So we are now at 2:51, and I just wanted to say a tremendous thanks for such a wonderful discussion. I really do think that as we continue this research and begin our research, that these kinds of insights are going to prove to continue to be invaluable. And I think that this was the perfect group to present this to. So I wanted to say thank you.
Thank you,
And I wanted to give
everyone.
that
This
to
was so
Rebecca as
much
well.
fun. Absolutely. Really appreciate everyone's time, all these insights. The Padlet will stay open and I'm going to keep reading it.
I will too. So please, if you think of anything else, please keep that Padlet open. I'm not sure why, Matt, but I've refreshed and tried in 3 different browsers, my Padlet as
Technology
well.
just isn't our friend today. We're fine. All
We've
the
had
lights
a
keep
we've
going
had a
off
few
above
issues.
me. It's all good.
It's
Okay,
fine.
listen.
The links are in the chat.
They're in the chat and I've tried to start it again. So anyway, thank you so much for all the help, and I'm going to save this chat as well. Thank you so much, guys. All right, and then we're gonna